Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike, to another enchanting episode of Magical Tales from the Slytherin Common Room, bringing your favorite Harry Potter fanfiction to audio format. So sit back, relax, and Accio headphones, and let the magic begin. Apostasy by Deydralinne, Chapter 31. Not a big deal. No one said a word as they made their way to Blaze's room, and besides one statement about how Daphne owed him 300 galleons, Theo didn't mention the bathroom incident again. Not that he needed to, because the moment they reached the door, Ginny's eyes blew wide in surprise. "You two had sex," she screeched. Hermione's mouth dropped open. She attempted to find the words, but she just ended up staring at her in disbelief. "Oh, please, I'm somewhat traumatized, not dead," Ginny whipped around to face Blaze, missing the way Draco stiffened beside her. Hermione squeezed his hand, both silently reassurance and a plea not to say anything. "You owe me 600 galleons. Hermione gawked. "Why is everyone betting on our sex life?" Draco cleared his throat and frowned at the redhead and her husband. "You two share a bank account." Ginny shrugged nonchalantly. "We didn't when we made the bet," she smirked at him. But Hermione didn't miss the way it failed to reach her eyes. "Gin, are you sure you're ready to do this? He can rot in his cell if you are not." Hermione moved into the room and sat at the end of the bed. Ginny sighed and bit her lip for a moment. "I don't want to wait, I hate that he's in this house at all. Even if it is in the dungeon, and I'm not scared of him, I'm just disgusted by him and what he did. Without Ron putting me in that body bind, I would have already killed him. It was a cheap shot. Tomorrow, when Tom returns, Blaze and I are taking him to Riddle Manor and handing him over. Tom can kill him however he likes. I don't care. I just want to be the one to tell him that." Hermione nodded. Okay. Looking back at her friend with an understanding, Harry's death was not a question, but a matter of when, and it seemed that the when would be tomorrow. She didn't offer to go with her. She figured that it would already be assumed that she would, because there was no reality in which Hermione ever left her to fight anything alone. Blaze might be Ginny's soulmate, but Ginny was and always would be the person in every situation that she could rely on to always be there, and who knew that the reverse would always be true. Harry fucking Potter was no exception. Hermione's immediate reaction upon seeing him hanging in his chains was to want to punch him across the face. But this moment wasn't about her. Theo had clearly healed the most lethal of his injuries that had been inflicted on him. As far as she was aware, everyone else in the house had taken a turn maiming him in some way or another. Blaze especially, before Ginny would see him. If she were being honest with herself, which she tried to do as often as possible, the fear that flooded Harry's eyes as they entered the corridor outside the cell felt like being given a treat. She couldn't stop the memory of Ginny sobbing against her in the bottom of the Astoria shower from playing in her head, and the knowledge that Harry, of all people, was the cause of it pissed her off to no end. He deserved every bit of pain that he got, and then some. "Please," he begged, "no more." His words invoked a disgusted stare from Blaze, but Hermione turned to look at Ginny. Hermione watched the way Ginny stared at him, the cold and distant look in her. He hadn't been the Harry Potter that either of them grew up with for years. He had complained so often about the changes that they had gone through, but did he realize that he changed too? "You're going to die tomorrow, Harry Potter. Know that no one is coming to save you this time." Her words fell, and silence filled the space, her eyes never leaving his. Hermione turned and watched as the realization that Ginny was right finally registered in his eyes. "Sleep well," Ginny stated, her voice void of any emotion. Harry's green eyes sought Hermione out, only to find her already watching him, a final pleading that she would see reason and save him hidden in the green orbs. Hermione had no reason. She saw reason long ago. Before she even left the Order, back before she was condemned for her actions, before he aided Kingsley in his crusade against her, back before he committed his own crimes by raping her friend. She had seen reason before she had even taken that first life. Harry was no longer the chosen one. He was just a man, a sad, pathetic excuse for one at that. Ginny turned and strolled from the cells, not waiting for Hermione or Blaise. "Did you know about Kingsley and the prophecy?" Hermione asked as calmly as she could. Harry immediately looked like a deer in the headlights. Hermione chuckled and shook her head. "Of course you did." She made to turn away, but his voice stopped her. "I found out about a year ago, but by then you had become this." His words were shaky and filled with guilt right up until the last word that he spat with disgust, as if she was a horrible person. Well, if she was, she didn't want to be good when good looked like him. She turned around with an incredulous smile. "You raped someone." "I didn't know." His cries sounded pathetic and unbelieving of even his own bullshit. Her feet carried her forward, and her fist collided with his nose, a satisfying crunch being the result. "You fucking liar. Don't you dare tell me you didn't know. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak, and she was fucking crying? Those are all good signs that she didn't want it. You fucking disgusting sack of shit. The only reason her husband, Harry exclaimed in shock. A pleased smile appeared on her face. "Oh, you didn't know. Blaise and Ginny are soulmates. They got married at the end of last month. And the only reason her husband hasn't ended your fucking life is because we all thought that Ginny deserved that right. But you are so insignificant now that she would rather give you to Tom." Personally, Hermione leaned in closer, "I was hoping she would feed you to the hounds." Hermione looked at the man through her lashes and felt nothing. His death would mean nothing but justice for Ginny. So when Hermione turned and followed Blaise and Draco out, it was with a smile for a brighter tomorrow. Ginny was in the process of pouring several drinks at the bar when Hermione found her again. "We are celebrating because honestly, it's about fucking time you two sorted your shit out and boned." Hermione quirked an eyebrow. "Who even says boned?" "I do," Ginny declared with a false happiness to her voice. "But as I was saying, you two finally getting over whatever barrier has stopped you boning these past few months is cause to celebrate." Pansy, who had entered the room rather unfortunately at that precise moment, looking worse than when she had retreated to her room several hours prior, scowled. "I would hardly say Hermione nearly dying is cause for celebration." The dark-haired witch took in the looks that were shared across all their faces, issuing an annoyed scoff in understanding. "What?" Ginny snarled an accusing look at her face as she spun on Hermione, hurt written all over her face. "You didn't tell her," Pansy snapped. "Pans, we've been a little busy," Blaise started. "No, we were busy yesterday, but there's no reason why no one has told her since then. You aren't helping her by keeping it from her." Pansy's voice rising in volume, the events of the past few days finally catching up to her, it seemed. "I was getting there," Hermione started. "Were you? When was that going to happen, Mai?" Ginny's tone made her recoil a little, stepping back into Draco's chest. His arms came to sit on her arm, and she wondered if it was intentional, that it was in the same spot as where the injury in question had been. It was supportive, but she could feel that he still had unresolved feelings about it too. "For fuck's sake, it's not even that big of a deal." That was the wrong thing to say, and she knew it immediately the moment the words left her mouth. Draco froze behind her, his hand disappearing. "Not a big deal," he hissed, quietly, his anger palpable. She could feel it radiating off of him, not in waves, but like a tsunami. "No," he took several deep breaths, but she was too scared to look at him, afraid of what she would find there. Too many people in this room were glaring at her, and it was setting off her fight and flight response in ways that made her skin crawl. "Not a big deal?" Draco's voice thundered, causing her to jump. A bitter laugh filtered out of him, twisting at the guilt in her stomach. "That's not what I—" Draco didn't stick around to hear what she had to say. He stormed from the sitting room without looking back, and Theo drew her a sympathetic look and followed after him. Hermione sighed. "That's not what I meant. I meant that this is war. We're in war. It's hardly the first time I've nearly died," she tried to explain, but Ginny was still staring at her in betrayal, and Pansy's glare had turned vicious. "Oh, I see. So you've been poisoned." "Pansy," Blaise snapped in a warning. Pansy ignored him, though. crossing her arms as she stepped forward toward her. Daphne and Astoria slid into the doorway, peering into the room in confusion, and all the while Ginny's eyes had not left her face. No, she was getting there, remember, Blaze? Besides, apparently being poisoned and nearly dying in the street is a regular occurrence for her. Poisoned, Ginny whispered in horror. Hermione begged the redhead silently. Tell me, Hermione, do your lovers also usually have to suck the venom from your body as well, making them violently ill, by the way, for hours afterwards, while blood pours from your mouth, nose, eyes, and ears, and you scream in pain too? Or was that just special to Draco and the rest of us? Is it just Theo who has had to work overtime to try and repair your veins and arteries because they wouldn't stop fucking bleeding? Pansy, that's enough, Blaze yelled. She felt the ground was shaking beneath her. The whooshing of blood filled her ears again. And it didn't seem to matter how deeply she tried to breathe in, not enough of it made it to her lungs. No one had told her this. Why had no one told her this? Fuck you, Blaze. Pansy whirled on him, screaming at him. You weren't even there. You didn't see what it was like. You have no idea. Theo had to use every single one of Astoria's special potions on her. Pansy's finger jabbed in Hermione's direction. She may as well have slapped Hermione. Wait, what? Hermione demanded. As well as half of the blood replenishers. The fucking plant that they were using for Tor's potion has no more fruit on it, which means that when Tor has another bad... Wait. Hermione couldn't breathe. Day, it's going to be bad, Theo. She was covered in her fucking blood. The room was covered in her blood, but you weren't here. Pansy shoved the man in the chest. He made no effort to stop her. Apparently no one had told him how bad it was either, if his face was anything to go by. You were off killing half the fucking prisoners for information. You didn't get to see the state of her, or Draco, or Theo when it was all said and done, and you weren't here. So, don't you dare tell me that's enough, she hissed, with so much venom that Astoria actually cowered behind Daphne. Pansy spun to look at her, and if Hermione didn't know better, she would have put the look down to pure, unbridled hatred. And you. Wait, what are you talking about? Hermione snapped. Her genuine surprise had Pansy straightening and scoffing, with a shake of her head. Unbelievable. No wonder you're walking around acting like you are. Here I was thinking you were just in denial, but they didn't even tell you, did they? Tears of frustration began welling up in Pansy's eyes. Wow, that's just great. Wow. Well, let me do the honors then, since I seem to be the only one willing to share information around here. You nearly died, Hermione. Not just like a little bit, like traumatically, in a big way. You wouldn't stop fucking bleeding. It was pouring out of you as quickly as it was being replenished. It took me 22 hours to find the fucking curse they used in the poison, which meant that for 22 hours, you were barely alive. And we were all working our asses off to try to save you and waiting around for another 8 to see if it had worked. But you know, it's no big deal. Pansy spat through gritted teeth before she turned and strode from the room. The other 4 sets of eyes looked to Hermione, and she began to feel like she was suffocating under the weight of it all. Her eyes locked with Astoria's, and her heart sank because the guilt was etched plain as day. Oh, look at Daphne confirmed what Hermione already suspected, which was that Pansy was telling the truth. Her defiant stare back at Hermione challenged her to argue with her, but Hermione had nothing left in her to argue with. It felt like she had just had the feet kicked out from under her, and she still couldn't fucking breathe because of course it was true. But no one had told her. Stay out of my room, she whispered, dropping her gaze to the floor. Everybody, stay out of my room. Hermione allowed her feet to carry her out of the room at a run and a flee up the stairs. Draco hadn't told her. Theo hadn't told her. No one told her. She wouldn't have stopped until she reached her room if Theo hadn't stepped out of Draco's room and onto the landing at that precise moment. His usual friendly smile, only slightly cautious, turned to greet her at the sounds of her approaching footsteps. Oh, hey, I think it's best to give him... What did you do? Hermione snapped through her mounting panic, her jaw clenching as she breathed heavily through her nose. Theo shook his head in confusion. What are you? But his face turned cold in realization. Pansy. It was a statement. Not a question, but his lack of denial made her want to be sick. You should have told me, Hermione seethed, her eyes finding the blonde wizard staring back at her from inside the doorway, a kind of panic on his face. You should have told me, she snapped. Stay out of my room. Just leave me alone, she whispered, before continuing to race up the stairs and slamming her bedroom door shut. She almost managed to make it to her patio before her panic attack took over completely, and she dropped to the ground, gasping for air while spots danced across her eyesight.